Ravi Sharma was a respected businessman and devoted family man. Anya Sharma, his 22-year-old niece, was a bright student chasing her dreams far from home. But behind their innocent smiles and quiet suburban life lay a twisted secret, one that would end in betrayal, obsession, and a brutal murder that shocked an entire community. In the quiet suburbs of Sacramento, California, the Sharma family lived what many considered a picture-perfect life. Their two-story home sat on a peaceful cul-de-sac, always well kept, with blooming roses out front and wind chimes that gently sang with the breeze. Neighbors waved warmly, children played in the street, and nothing ever seemed out of place. At the heart of this admired household was 48-year-old Ravi Sharma, a well-established businessman in the local real estate scene. Ravi was known for his generosity, calm nature, and deep devotion to his family. He was married to Priya, a soft-spoken woman who often kept to herself but was respected for her kindness and dedication as a homemaker. Recently, a new presence had entered the home, Ravi's 22-year-old niece Anya Sharma. She had arrived from Mumbai to pursue a master's degree in psychology at a nearby university. With her curious eyes, shy smile, and quiet grace, Anya quickly charmed the neighbors. People often praised how lucky she was to have such a supportive uncle and aunt helping her adjust to a new life in the United States. Anya and Ravi shared a warm relationship. He took pride in showing her around the city, helping with her paperwork, and ensuring she had everything she needed. They were often seen walking together in the evenings or having coffee at the small cafe 2 blocks away. Many admired their bond, thinking it was simply a case of an uncle stepping in to support a fatherless girl so far from home. Inside the home, Anya was polite, helpful, and always respectful. She helped Priya with chores, studied late into the night, and rarely caused any trouble. But as the months passed, something subtle began to shift. The way Ravi looked at her lingered just a moment too long. His compliments, though wrapped in humor, often carried an undercurrent of something deeper. At first, it was harmless enough to ignore. An extra plate of food set aside for her, a surprise gift just because, an accidental touch that felt too familiar. Anya, perhaps unsure or unwilling to question it, said nothing. Over time, their late-night talks grew more frequent. What started as innocent guidance turned into long, personal conversations behind closed doors. Ravi spoke to her about his frustrations with work, his stale marriage, his regrets. He painted himself as lonely, misunderstood, even emotionally neglected. Anya, young and emotionally vulnerable, listened and comforted him. She didn't see the trap being laid. To the outside world, the Sharmas still looked perfect. Anya still helped with chores, still smiled in family photos, and Ravi still waved to the neighbors each morning. But inside the house, a forbidden connection was forming, one that crossed every boundary of trust and morality, and yet no one suspected a thing. The calm on the surface masked a growing storm, one that would soon explode with devastating consequences. As the weeks passed, the bond between Ravi and Anya grew darker and more intense. What had once been hidden behind the veil of familial affection was now something neither of them could fully explain or control. The boundary between right and wrong had already been crossed, but instead of pulling away, they both became tangled in a web of secrecy, guilt, and unspoken desire. It was a secret neither dared to admit out loud, but both continued to feed in subtle, dangerous ways. Ravi became increasingly drawn to Anya's presence. He began rearranging his schedule to be home when she returned from class. He offered to drive her to campus, even when she insisted she could take the bus. He complimented her constantly, not in the way an uncle might praise a niece, but in ways that made her feel both special and confused. At first, Anya tried to convince herself it was just his way of being caring. But as the attention grew more intense and possessive, doubt crept in. She noticed how Ravi's mood would shift drastically if she talked about her friends at university, especially male classmates. If she laughed at a message on her phone, he'd immediately ask who it was. When she made plans to study with others, he would subtly discourage her or offer to help her himself. It was possessiveness masked as protection. She felt the weight of his gaze even when she wasn't looking, and the invisible leash around her tightened with every passing day. Despite the tension, Anya felt trapped in the connection. She had no one else in the city. Her Aunt Priya was distant, always busy in the kitchen or watching television, never asking questions. Her parents were continents away and deeply traditional. She couldn't imagine trying to explain what she was feeling, what was happening, without being blamed, so she kept quiet, and Ravi took advantage of the silence. He began showering her with gifts, a new laptop, expensive clothes, even a necklace on her birthday that looked far too romantic to be from an uncle. Anya didn't know how to refuse without creating suspicion. She had moments of clarity where she wanted to leave, to move out, to go back home. But Ravi would always sense it. He would talk to her in emotional tones, reminding her how much he had done for her, how empty his life would be without her, how no one else could understand him the way she did. It wasn't love, it was obsession. Ravi's feelings had grown into something unhealthy and dangerous. He no longer saw Anya as a niece or even a person. She had become an extension of his desire, something he believed he owned. His world revolved around her, and the fear of losing her began to consume him. Anya, on the other hand, started to pull away. She no longer lingered in the living room. She avoided eye contact. She stayed late on campus and ignored his texts. Ravi noticed every change, and it terrified him. He had tasted something forbidden and now couldn't let it go. What he feared most was not discovery, it was abandonment, and in his mind, if she wasn't his, she couldn't belong to anyone else. The delicate balance that had kept their secret intact began to crumble rapidly. What was once hidden in glances and whispered conversations was now teetering on the edge of exposure. Anya had grown increasingly distant, no longer willing to entertain Ravi's emotional manipulation. She stopped replying to his late-night messages, declined his offers to drop her off at school, and often made excuses to avoid spending time alone with him. Her behavior had changed so noticeably that even Priya began to take note, though she remained silent, unsure of what was happening beneath her own roof. The turning point came one evening when Priya accidentally picked up Ravi's tablet to check a recipe. A notification flashed on the screen, a message from Anya. Curious and sensing something off, she opened it. What she found was shocking. Dozens of messages, exchanged over several months, filled with intimate undertones, confessions of feelings, photos, and emotional manipulation. Her hands trembled as she read through them. It wasn't just one message taken out of context. It was a full-blown relationship that had been carried on under her nose. Priya confronted Ravi in a state of disbelief and fury. He tried to deny it at first, blaming Anya, calling it a misunderstanding, saying she had taken his kindness the wrong way. But the evidence was undeniable, and when Priya threatened to expose everything to the family and the police, he finally broke down and begged for forgiveness. He cried, swore it meant nothing, claimed it had gone too far but had never been physical. Priya didn't believe him. The next morning she called Anya's father in Mumbai. Within a few hours the situation escalated. Anya's father was furious and heartbroken, demanding his daughter return to India immediately. He called her over and over, but Anya, overwhelmed and ashamed, didn't answer. Ravi overheard the conversation and went into a panic. He knew if Anya left, everything would fall apart. He had risked his marriage, his reputation, and his freedom for this relationship. If she walked away now and told the truth, there would be no saving him. In desperation, Ravi tried to speak to Anya one last time. He waited for her near campus, cornered her after class, and begged her to talk to him. She refused. She was scared, angry, and exhausted. She told him to leave her alone and walked away without looking back. That moment shattered something inside Ravi. It wasn't just rejection. It was the complete collapse of the fantasy he had built around her. His fear turned into rage. He couldn't bear the thought of her telling anyone else, of her leaving him behind and destroying his image. Back home, he became restless and withdrawn. Priya avoided him, packing her things and staying with a friend. The house was cold and silent, filled with tension. Ravi stopped going to work. He sat in his study for hours, staring at nothing. His obsession had grown too big to contain. In his mind, Anya was the one who had betrayed him, and he convinced himself that if he couldn't have her, no one could. Anya's disappearance sent immediate shockwaves through her small circle of friends and her university. She had been expected at an evening study session with classmates, but she never showed up. Her phone went straight to voicemail. Her roommate, alarmed by the silence, called the police the next morning. At first, authorities treated it as a possible case of voluntary absence. A 22-year-old student missing for less than 24 hours wasn't unusual, but her friends insisted it was out of character. Anya never disappeared without telling someone. She had been acting withdrawn, but not in a way that suggested she would run away. Within 2 days, the search intensified. Her last known location was a coffee shop near downtown Sacramento, where she had been seen on security footage. She was meeting someone, though the camera angle didn't capture the other person's face. Investigators pulled surveillance footage from nearby stores and traffic cameras, eventually piecing together a trail. The car she got into was registered to Ravi Sharma. Ravi was brought in for questioning. He appeared nervous but cooperative. He claimed Anya had asked to meet him and confided that she was overwhelmed and thinking of leaving school. He said he dropped her off at a park and hadn't seen her since, but his story was riddled with inconsistencies. He couldn't recall exact times. He hesitated when asked about his conversations with Anya over the past week. His phone logs revealed repeated calls to her number, even after she had gone missing. Investigators were not convinced. Things took a grim turn when a maintenance worker at an abandoned warehouse on the city's edge noticed a foul odor coming from a parked car in the lot. The license plate was partially covered with leaves and dirt, but once cleared, it matched the second vehicle registered to Ravi. Inside the trunk was Anya's lifeless body, wrapped in a blanket and bound at the wrists. She had been strangled, and the bruises on her arms suggested she had fought back. Her phone and bag were missing, and there were signs the vehicle had been wiped down, but not thoroughly. Forensic experts recovered partial prints on the door handle and traces of Ravi's DNA under her fingernails. Faced with overwhelming evidence, Ravi's facade crumbled. After hours of interrogation, he confessed. He claimed he hadn't planned to kill her. He said they had argued, that Anya had threatened to expose their relationship to her father and the police, and that in a moment of rage he had snapped, but investigators doubted it was unplanned. They believed he had lured her there with the intention of silencing her permanently. The murder stunned the community. The respected businessman who once hosted neighborhood cookouts and holiday parties was now at the center of a gruesome crime. People struggled to reconcile the image of the family man with the man capable of killing his own niece. The betrayal ran deeper than just blood. It was a complete violation of trust, morality, and decency. The truth was out, but it came far too late for Anya. The courtroom was packed on the day Ravi Sharma's trial began. Media vans lined the street outside, and protesters held signs demanding justice for Anya. Inside, the atmosphere was heavy. The once respected businessman now sat behind a pane of glass, wearing a prison-issued jumpsuit, his face drawn and lifeless. The man who once smiled at neighbors and handed out candy to local kids on Halloween was now facing life behind bars for the murder of his own niece. Prosecutors laid out the timeline with chilling clarity. They showed messages exchanged between Ravi and Anya, painting a clear picture of manipulation, control, and emotional abuse. Witnesses included Anya's professors, classmates, and her roommate, each testifying to her recent fear, isolation, and her repeated attempts to distance herself from her uncle. The prosecution emphasized how Ravi had used his position of trust, age, and influence to exploit her emotionally, and eventually took her life when she tried to break free. When Priya took the stand, the courtroom fell silent. With a trembling voice, she recounted the moment she discovered the messages, her confrontation with Ravi, and the unraveling of everything she had once believed. She had known Ravi for over 2 decades. She had trusted him with her life, but now, looking at him from the witness box, she said he was a stranger, a dangerous man she had never truly known. Her words were raw and heartbreaking, especially when she described the guilt she carried for not seeing the signs sooner. Ravi's defense attempted to shift blame, suggesting the relationship had been mutual, that Anya had grown too dependent on him, and that her threats had pushed him to a breaking point, but the jury saw through the attempt. The evidence was irrefutable. His confession, the surveillance footage, the forensic findings, and the psychological profile compiled by court experts painted him as a man who had become obsessed, controlling, and ultimately violent. After a brief deliberation, the jury returned with a unanimous verdict, guilty of first-degree murder. The judge delivered a life sentence without the possibility of parole. There was no reaction from Ravi as the sentence was read. He sat motionless, eyes fixed on the floor, as if he had already accepted his fate. Outside the courtroom, Anya's friends and supporters gathered to remember her. Candlelight vigils were held at the university. Her parents, devastated and broken, returned to India with her ashes, carrying the weight of a tragedy that had unfolded thousands of miles away. The story dominated headlines for weeks. Documentaries, podcasts, and news specials dissected every detail of the case. But for those closest to Anya, no explanation could ever be enough. A young life had been stolen by someone who was supposed to protect her. What remained was a shattered family, a grieving community, and a painful reminder that danger doesn't always come from the outside. Sometimes it lives quietly within the walls we trust the most. The masks people wear can hide the darkest intentions, and by the time the truth comes out, it's already too late.